So it's 3 minutes to 4. We'll wait a few minutes for everyone to join in, and then we will start with the introductions and everything.
You found that this time is the best to hold a session during Ramadan, because we've been contemplating the timing. Because for people who fast, what's the best time to do such sessions? Is it better at this time or after iftar, or what is the consensus on this?
I think this, the last hour or two before iftar would be ideal. Halla, with people moving around, they probably should be heading back home anyway.
Yeah.
So this could be a good time.
I guess, Reem, with this quarantine, everybody's schedules and times is all messed up. There's no more routine.
Yeah, I know, but because we have a session coming up, so we were just, trying to brainstorm in-house when is the best time to do it during Ramadan, because, yeah.
Well, I saw some sessions like at 9:30 at night, so I think 4 still is good, but we can do a quick survey maybe at the end where Omar people can write in the chat box what they think and give that back to you as feedback.
You will make it. So how many members do you have?
So Jaitoa has 90 members, corporate members. Roughly 50% of those are inbound tour operators, and the other 50% are associate members. So we have hotels, transportation companies, anyone within the tourism value chain could be a member.
Yeah. Hi, Dr. Talib. Hi, Dr.
دكتور طالب, مساء الخير, كيف صحتك؟
هلا مساء الخير, كيفك عمر حبيبي؟
Good, thank you for joining. It's a pleasure.
بالعكس, the pleasure is mine حبيبي.
شكرا لك.
Good to see Reem particularly.
كيفك دكتور طالب? Was my first boss.
No, we're always colleagues.
Just 10 years ago.
20 years ago.
25.
شايفه بالله, you have to remind me. ليت كيفك. You have to unmute yourself. Hi, Lay.
Hello.
Hi.
أنا ممتاز, الحمد لله.
Excellent. Good to be with you guys. Always good to be with you guys.
الله يخليك.
مرحبا دكتور طالب.
أهلين. الله
يخليك. New look باللحية.
شايف بالله. This is a Corona look.
You're very nice. It's good to change, John.
Hi, كيفك حبيبي? How are you? Great.
Good. So I think we can wait 1 more minute before we start, and then so that we don't keep everybody waiting.
Okay. Don't worry about it. The time is the only luxury we have.
It's true.
مساء الخير جميعا.
اهلا كيفك؟ هلا عوني, كيفك حبيبي؟ You made it in time.
Yes بالوزارة.
Good. How is it بالوزارة؟
والله يعني they are working part time and مش skeleton staff, ما في ناس.
Okay.
Very minimal staff. Trying to get things going يعني.
Who did you see? مين شفت بالوزارة؟
الأمين العام الدكتور عماد حجازين.
He's okay.
Yeah, but very busy بالاوتيلات عشان عم بيحضروا لموضوع الطلاب اللي بدهم يرجعوا مع الفنادق.
Yes, I hope they don't use البحر الميت كمان مرة.
لا, they will.
لا والله, I don't think they should, to be honest.
Why not?
I think البحر الميت لازم يضل السياحة الداخلية. It's only 2,000 rooms.
لا هو
فنادق عمان is better.
لا, ما هو الفكرة إنه يعملوا حجر أمني يعني to lock the area.
But it's okay. They can lock them.
الوف يعني لما بصير الوف they lock it security wise يعني عشان ما حدا يدخل ويطلع.
يعني I have a different opinion on this. I don't know.
يمكن for security it's easier for them to have it in one place.
It's easier بس بدك you have to look at the bigger picture. We need to encourage السياحة الداخلية. It's the most important part.
بس هلا برمضان ما في سياحه داخليه اصلا.
رمضان is a different story. I agree.
لا ما it will start after the 8th of May.
Okay, good.
الإكسيدوس هاي.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. You still have your setup في البحر الميت أنت مش هيك؟
Yes.
Good.
إن شاء الله خير يا سيدي إن
شاء الله.
Good. طب إذا بتسمحوا لي إذا بتحبوا it's 4:02 إذا بتحبوا نبلش we have 50 participants. By the time we do the introductions we'll have more people join لأنه الكل على الوقت it seems. Good afternoon everybody. Thank you for joining us on this afternoon. For those who were able to go out today for the first time in many days, I hope you had a good time out. It's great to have everyone join the session. My name is Omar Hazine. I'm the Executive Director at the JITOA, the Jordan Inbound Tour Operators Association. We have an interesting panel with us this afternoon. Let me quickly do an introduction to everyone. First, we have Damien Cook, who is the CEO of eTourism Frontiers. Some of you may know Damien from the work he has done here in Jordan with the Jordan Tourism Board through the USAID Best Tourism Project. Basically, Damien specializes in developing online tourism in emerging markets and also does work in tourism media and marketing strategy as well. He's going to have some insights for us from a very industry-specific point of view. Thank you, Damien, for joining us. Next, we also have Reem Qsous, who's the Managing Director for Endeavor Jordan Office in charge of the Jordan operations. And Reem comes with a wealth of industry experience, mostly in economic impact, analysis, strategy formulation, business intelligence, and she's going to have an interesting insight on pivoting businesses in times of change. That's going to be also very insightful for the people who have joined us. Thank you, Reem, as well for joining us and for supporting JITOA as always. Last but not least, we have Mr. Laith Al-Qasim, CEO of ISSF, which is the Innovative Startup and SME Fund. Laith also comes with a wealth of experience in business development across various sectors. He has been involved in the tourism sector at some point and continues to advise many businesses, including tourism startups, in today's ever-changing world. Thank you, Laith, for also being with us. Moderating this panel would be Karim Mbarak, who is the Vice Chairman of the JITOA. And before we start with Karim, who would do a quick introduction, some housekeeping notes. We have everybody on mute. Appreciate you keeping that on. We will be taking questions and answers towards the end. If you have any questions, you can send them to me in a direct message, WhatsApp or email if you have my contacts as well, so that we can organize it. And after the panelists are done, would also like to have the insights of His Excellency Dr. Talib Rifa'i, who has been very kind enough to join us as well. Thank you, Dr. Talib, for joining us. And without further ado, I'm going to leave it with Karim Mbarak for a quick introduction. Karim?
Thank you, Omar. And once again, welcome everybody to the first webinar that's being conducted by JITOA, the Jordan Inbound Tour Operator Association. And the title of this webinar is The New Normal for Tourism. We all know that we've been enjoying a wonderful period in 2018 and 19, with the influx of tourism. And I remember back in 2016, when we were barely able to look a month or two ahead with reservations. And then in January 2020, we were looking forward to October 2021 and even further. And it was just getting better and better. Even many of us in 2019 have invested a lot because of what we can see for 18 months ahead in our infrastructure, in technology, in our teams, in ourselves, in our companies. And all of that investment today basically has stopped, or because of business we have stopped everything. And And now we are at a point where we need to look at how do we sustain our businesses? What do we do in the short term and in the longer term? And this is why we have this distinguished panel with us today, is to help us understand where are we today in tourism? What is it that we need to do as organizations to be able to sustain ourselves, and what is it as organizations we need to do to change, to be able to adapt to what I call Tourism 2.0, what's coming ahead. And Tourism 2.0 is going to be a different type of tourist, and who are we and how are we going to adapt to be able to provide for them. Without any further ado, I'm going to pass on now to Damien, who's going to be sharing with us some of the facts and figures, as well as some expectations of what the new normal is going to be. Go ahead, Damien. Oh, and one more thing, I think everybody needs to know that this session is being recorded. Sharing everything later on with everybody in case you missed anything.
Okay, thank you very much, Kareem and Omar, for inviting me to be here today. Can everybody hear me clearly? Is my audio clear? Give me a thumbs up if it's good for you. Fantastic. Always a pleasure to be back in Jordan, even virtually. It's been a few months since I was last there. And it's great to be with everybody once again, and to be together during these very trying times that we find ourselves in. As mentioned today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what we're seeing around the world in terms of the impacts on tourism. I took part in a two-part webinar over the week before last and the week before, that was organized through several European and regional travel authorities, funded by TripAdvisor and Oxford Tourism Economics. I know we had quite a lot of people from the Jordan trade on that webinar. For those of you that weren't there, I'm going to recap some of the things that were discussed in that session as well. We had quite a lot of in-depth economic analysis and projections from Oxford in that one. Not sure why I'm not advancing here. There we go. As mentioned, most of you probably know me from the many meetings we've had. I've been working with Jordan for the past decade, with JTB directly via the USAID projects, and then direct projects with JITOA and other associations as well. Some of the content I'm going to be showing you today is stuff that I've been working on with a colleague of mine, Greg Klassen, who you may have met as well. He and I worked on the current strategy that JTB have. Greg was the former CEO of Canada Tourism, and we now consult together with multiple destinations around the world. So as a strategist who specializes in change, particularly the change brought about by technology, by changing markets and by changing travelers, the greatest change we have is a change is brought about by crises, and there's never been a crisis like this one when it comes to the change that it's brought to our industry. The last 2 months of my life have been spent talking to one destination, one trade association after another about this situation, and it is still a fluid situation. It is still changing. We need to keep abreast of these changes as they come, but we're starting to see some of what this session is titled, The New Normal, starting to emerge and what that may look like, and that's what I'd like to talk about today. Really, the challenge for all of us has been accepting the reality of what's happened. And unfortunately, there's still a little bit of reluctance to accept just how extreme this crisis has been. There's been a lot of belief out there that this is short-lived, that we're going to see the end of this crisis soon or in the next couple of months. And increasingly, we're seeing that's not the case. And the real reality is that this is an existential crisis for tourism. And it impacted us at an unimaginable speed. We all witnessed this shift from what was identified as we may have a problem with the outbound Chinese market into a complete cessation of all travel and tourism around the world within a matter of weeks, and just over a month. The cancellation of ITB, which we also saw as this radical event within tourism, now seems like a small happening with everything that we've seen happening, the cessation of air travel, the closing off of borders, and effectively now, as declared yesterday, travel restrictions in every single country and territory in the world. So one of the biggest questions we see as we move into this new normal is, when is the current situation going to end? When will we see an end to this pandemic when we can say that tourism has returned to normal? And the reality is that it's not going to end quickly, or even, I hate to say, have a defined ending. When we look at projections for how this is going to play out, we can't really say there'll be a set date when I can tell you all on the whatever of July or August, we'll be back to where we were in 2019. It's not going to happen like that. The end of this crisis will come in phases. Those phases will be dictated by politics, by science, and by the resumption of travel via the lifting of restrictions. And each country will have a different approach to that, each region, each association, and each international business. So we actually need to look at this as a phased return and identify when those phases are likely to happen so that we can respond to the indicators of change that we see when we're shifting from one phase to the next. But the reality is that what we're returning to is not 2019. Travel is going to fundamentally change. The sector will be different. As Kareem said, we're talking about a new form of tourism that's been shaped by this pandemic. The 29 strategies that we all had in place, and I worked on the one for JTB, will no longer apply because they were built on assumptions that no longer exist, markets that have fundamentally changed, channels and access to destination that have changed or do not exist as well. So we're not going to be back where we were in 2019. We really need to accept that every single destination in the world, including Jordan, is now a startup business, as are all of your businesses. You are starting from square one. You do have knowledge of travel. You have great knowledge and resources for your country and for Jordan as a destination, but you're starting up again at a strategic level. That presents great challenges, but it also presents some opportunities. If we make better informed decisions to rebuild our businesses and rebuild our destination to work within the new environment we're going to find ourselves. And the reality is that this needs work now. Airlines will decide which destinations they're going to start flying back to, which parts of their network they'll reopen. Tour operators will decide where their priority destinations they want to send clients to once that becomes accessible. And visitors themselves will decide which destinations they're going to want to visit. And they'll prioritize those destinations based on those that have shown they're ready to take tourists, that they offer carrying capacity to airlines, that they offer business levels to tour operators, and that they are safe and hygienic and managed for those potential travelers that want to travel again. So the destinations that we will see recover quickest and first will be the ones that plan now at a destination level and also at a business level as well. Now, while we can make our plans and while we can start to assess where we're going to be, we also need to understand, and I know it's difficult, is that science is currently dictating economics. The economic state of the world has been put on pause through science. And we need to await those scientific decisions and our understanding of the virus, our understanding of the pandemic before economic decisions can be made. There's tremendous pressure now for herd immunity, for lifting of restrictions based on initial scientific data, but we need to wait until scientists agree those approaches. Business cannot dictate economics solely without those scientific approvals. And it means that policy will be created from this balance between science and economics. And there's obviously great pressure to do something because of the economic impacts. From the studies we've seen from Oxford Tourism Economics, McKinsey and other research bodies, we've seen that the financial impact, economic impacts of this crisis are going to be worse than the global financial crisis in terms of the impact on GDP, in terms of the impact on personal wealth. In tourism terms, it's projected by Oxford to be 9 times more of a negative impact than 9/11 had on the travel sector. What really concerns us, obviously, is a sustained impact on wealth. People are losing jobs, people are losing investments, people are losing their 401ks, they're losing pensions. People are being forced for one of a couple to work while the other looks after children as schools are closed and with no definite reopening date. And there's going to be a sustained impact on wealth, and that is potential travel spend. So travel is one of the most impacted industries due to this combination of loss of wealth among potential travelers and loss of aviation and travel channels for them to reach destinations. But we also need to understand when we look at this from a business or economic standpoint, that in multiple sectors, the pandemic has accelerated the evolution of business. The Economist wrote an excellent piece on this recently, that the pandemic is starting to accelerate trends that we already saw that were reshaping business. Think about cinemas, for example. Some people are saying they won't reopen because of Netflix and because of on-demand entertainment. We already saw that happening, but the pandemic may have accelerated that shift. And there are equally travel trends that existed that we saw last year that this will accelerate. Consider that last year, 2019, was considered, as Kareem said, one of the most successful years in travel and tourism when it came to volume of travel and revenue. But Thomas Cook still went out of business last year. Why was that? Many people will argue the economics and management of that company, but it was being driven by changing travel habits. The decommoditization of mass tourism and the rise of independent travel was already changing the travel landscape. It was pushing towards more independent and higher end travel. This is going to accelerate that process, in my opinion. Obviously, the aviation industry is central here, and they will dictate the return of international tourism because we need those flights for people to return. Research has suggested, this comes from Oxford Tourism Economics, that the majority of airlines in the world were operating with a 2-month profit window, or basically 2 months of savings in the bank. And without revenue for 2 months, they will start to become bankrupt, start to go out of business in rapid succession. And we're seeing that come to fruition. Without stimulus, without nationalization, airlines are starting to go. In the last week, we've seen South African Airways gone, Air Mauritius gone, Virgin Australia gone, multiple other airlines starting to have doubt cast over their future. And that's particularly true at the lower end of the and high volume driven end of the aviation market at the LCC, which is incredibly important for Jordan because it's become a fundamental part of the tourism model, and the charter network as well. And what we're seeing in aviation and in multiple areas of tourism is that the volume-driven business model is being eroded by those policies, those restrictions, which are being driven by science. So what is the new normal we're heading towards? Global policies are going to dictate local economics for some time. Decisions about when people are allowed to travel and when they're allowed to fly and which countries are allowed to access are going to dictate when people can travel, how people are going to travel. And that needs to be taken into consideration for our strategy. We can invest into a strategy for Jordan, but if those people cannot physically get on a plane and get here, if they're not allowed by their country's governments to travel to that destination, that's going to be a big part of the picture we need to consider. It's very likely we're going to see the rise of bilateral tourism agreements. Countries signing bilateral agreements to send tourists to each other's countries. Once certain standards are met in airports, in aviation standards, in hotels, that they agree they will send tourists to that country. Australia and New Zealand, who have both imposed extreme restrictions, Australia talking about potentially closing its borders for a year, are talking to each other about forming an agreement like this. And I think we're going to see this within the EU with potentially other economic blocs like that. The forming of bilateral tourism agreements is a likely change that we may see. We're going to see an increased cost to aviation and travel. And I'll talk a little bit when we look at the new normal of what aviation and hotels might be like, why we're going to see an increase in cost that's needed. We're obviously going to see an increasingly regulated trade. Because people do not want to see second waves of the virus, people want to prevent its return, we're going to see a great regulation of some travel behaviors and business models. Because of this increasing cost, rate is unlikely to define occupancy. One thing destinations and businesses shouldn't be doing is considering a race to the bottom to undersell each other and try and cut their costs as quickly as possible to get travelers back based on price. We all know how dangerous that can be at the best of times once we start competing on cost alone and that race to the bottom model. It's what created mass tourism, it's what created over-tourism, and we need to be careful that we don't bring it back in a way that's destructive to our destinations at a time when they're most vulnerable. So success is really going to depend on careful thinking and strategy and access to data. Greg and I, working with destinations around the world, have suggested a 3-phase approach in everybody's strategies. React, how we're reacting now and how we manage this crisis. As we get it under control, it starts to plateau, that we rethink and re-strategize, re-segment, identify potential travelers, potential channels, and then use that approach to shift us into recovery. The biggest question, of course, everyone is asking is when? When do we move from reacting into recovering? And how long will that rethinking phase last? And it's hard to say. We can look at the scientific models. We can see the basic projections that many countries are now starting to peak in terms of numbers. They're looking at a plateauing period basically through the summer and a decrease in numbers, but with potential resurgence of the virus in the fall. But if we look at those periods, we can see where we want to shift from reacting now into a period of rethinking and when we can start identifying when recovery will come. But each of those points will be a shift of that phase, and we need to look at the indicators of what will indicate that we can move towards recovery and when we should start implementing the new strategies that we create. And I'll talk later about what some of those indicators may be. In that initial reaction phase, we need to understand that the most important thing everyone's looking for now is information. It's become capital for tourism destinations. Everyone's looking at those stats. Everyone's looking at those apps on their phone. They want to know the spread of the disease, the numbers of the disease, when they're looking at countries starting to decline in numbers. That information is important, but so is the information that destinations and businesses are providing, because that information is your trust that you have with potential travelers. So destinations that provide good, reliable information to those airlines, to those travel partners, and to potential travelers are critical. The way you deal with your travelers now and your customers now is critical, particularly when it comes to cancellations and refunds and reimbursements. The way you behave now will be remembered by the market, and communication is a critical part of dealing with those markets. Official channels for countries are extremely important for them to talk to those partners around the world. It shouldn't be a promotional Facebook page or a channel where they're putting out their updates about the health status within country. Find official channels to communicate that information, and Jordan has done a very good job both in management of the virus and of information in that respect. Many regions are starting to create online resource hubs. I'm working with PATA in Asia at the moment to set up an online centralized information hub for all Asian destinations. And it's important destinations talk to their industry as well through associations like JITOA, carrying out surveys, using research tools to actually find out where the industry is suffering, where they see opportunities, and where they need stimulus and support. Digital is more important than ever. Our strategies that we build need to be digital first. Why? Those offline markets that some of us used to talk about, people that didn't book online, that didn't find content about our destinations online, many of them now will, because they've spent the last 2 to 3 months of their life as digital natives. They're stuck in their houses, they're online, they're using Netflix, they're shopping online. Pretty much everybody in the world now is becoming a hard and fast digital native. It's still one of the simpler, most cost-effective channels we can use. And while some trust has been eroded online because of the disinformation and misinformation we've seen in social media, we need to win that back. So what's important at this point, as we're in this reaction phase, shifting towards rethinking, is that we don't forget about our markets. We want people to come back to Jordan, end of this year or next year, once we start opening up to the world. It's important they remain engaged with the brand, that we don't disappear from their radar. So we shouldn't be doing business. We shouldn't have marketing strategies in place that are about conversion and sales. Of course not. It's impossible to sell at this point. But keep your customers aware that Jordan exists and stay on their radar. And that means not being invisible. We have a huge opportunity in that people around the world have literally become a captive audience. Everybody's in their house. Everybody is online constantly. They've gotten to the bottom of their Netflix menu. They're looking for content. And one of the things they're dreaming about doing, research has shown us, is traveling. It's one of the first things they want to do when this pandemic ends. So destinations and businesses are giving them virtual experiences now. See this experience now, come and travel later or travel tomorrow, as per the UNWTO campaign. Engage now, travel later. And make your travel plans. It's why we're seeing virtual tours of museums, art galleries opening their exhibitions online, zoos putting webcams in their enclosures. Greece is building a campaign around this. It's not a sales campaign, but it is an engagement campaign called Greece from Home. Come and travel to Greece from home. And they've got lots of great virtual content, cooking lessons, Greek lessons, guides that can take you around historical sites, all of that in the virtual space. I'm currently isolated in Kenya, where I'm based, but I'm working with our ministry here. I'm an advisor to our minister and our DMO. We are going to start live streaming safaris to the world from the next couple of weeks. We had connectivity challenges around that, but we've had a team of people, of innovative people, who've developed these backpacks you can see here, which will enable us to live stream from anywhere in the country. We're going to put these with safari guides and let them go out and share our wildlife several times a day with the world. Literal scheduled safaris into different areas, different activities, and different products every single day. Some destinations are starting to find things for tourism staff that are laid off to do to support the destination. In Australia, scuba diving providers in the Great Barrier Reef have now offered their dive instructors and staff to work with conservationists to go to the reefs and replant coral and start to regenerate the reef, showing that tourism has an active role in protecting the reef so that when those divers do come back next year, it's even better than it was last year. That's also finding ways for those staff to still be engaged and still be employed, particularly when you find government stimulus and support to support those sorts of initiatives, as opposed to just paying staff to be on permanent furlough, finding alternative roles that they can fulfill. So when we look at rethinking and re-strategization, we need to look at the first phase of potential travelers that we have. And the obvious one for Jordan is the domestic market. You yourself have a domestic market desperate to travel, and we need to make sure we facilitate that at price point and at accessibility to make sure that we can generate as much domestic tourism as possible once it becomes possible and get cash flow back into the industry. Then we need to look at the region, perhaps at the UAE, and those short haul flights, relatively short haul flights that can access Jordan without passing through hubs, which is where there'll be challenges as the aviation sector starts to resume. Once you get hubs and connections into play, whether people can travel to those hubs from different places. So focusing on short haul regional as we head towards international. Take stock of products in Jordan that will work for the domestic market, that will work for the regional market, and then will be those flagship products during a recovery campaign. Keep in mind that the pandemic has changed the way people will travel, and some products are going to be viewed through the prism of the pandemic. Buffets, for example. I've seen one destination when they did their contact tracing that found one of their vectors were hotel buffets, and there were 31 cases of transmission from a single hotel buffet. Think about that and then extrapolate that out to all travel behaviors. Cruise ships. We all know that over the last decade, we've seen multiple outbreaks of viruses on cruise ships before. And again, they became a critical vector in this. That's going to be a challenge for that industry. Think about Airbnb and travel sharing, which has revolutionized the travel industry, but questions will be asked about health and safety regulations within unlicensed and unregistered properties as well. So the pandemic itself will become a prism to rethink tourism. It's also important that we have a yield strategy. As I said, that we're not racing to the bottom and that we're protecting the yield and the income that we have from travel as well. So there's going to be a period of triage, a bit like hospitals deciding who are the critical cases, who are the important cases that need focus. We need to look at our air carriers to Jordan. They've all effectively stopped. Which ones will be the first ones back? If RJ is going to be supported from government, what is its network and will it be one of the first ones back? Which international travel legacy carriers will we see come back? What's happening with the LCCs? How likely are they to come back? That's going to need engagement and lobbying with those airlines to get those routes moving again. How much of our trade can survive without stimulus? Who's at the most risk of losing their business? What operators and channels may not return? And then really critically for Jordan, which market segments may not be able to return to Jordan? With multiple destinations I'm working with, one of the market segments we're really looking at is the plus 60 or 60 plus 65 traveler. That demographic has been one of the most impacted by this virus. They're the most vulnerable when it comes to their health. It's where most of the deaths and infections have occurred. Now, those travelers in that age group may have reduced income through medical bills, but more importantly, at a psychological level, will be one of the ones most concerned about traveling because they are the most vulnerable and they are the most at risk. And we know in Jordan that we have sold to an older demographic in many of our products, our package tours, our cruise passengers, our faith tourism as well. How viable is it that those people are going to return? We do need to rethink how we can get alternative segments and younger travelers to consume those products. And it's going to mean a different marketing approach. So then as we head into recovery, this is where the new normal is going to start to emerge. And we need to look at the phase indicators of when that new normal is arriving. Those are going to be the easing of travel restrictions in Jordan itself, which are already starting to see some lifting of restrictions. But once we see the enablement, as we've seen in Aqaba and then across the country, of people having freedom of movement will be critical. The resumption of that domestic travel and how we target those domestic tourists. Resumption of flights at a short haul and regional point, and then the resumption of independent travel. Now, everybody asks about when. These are decisions that were made by airlines. Our projections are still looking at real air access returning around August or September at any kind of meaningful level. And I still think that's potentially an optimistic projection. So we need to build timelines within your business and within the destination and start to look at where these indicators will lie and start to stretch our marketing budgets, our ability to sustain our businesses, as our other speakers will address, through these periods. What customers we're likely to get at each of those periods as we head towards the longer goal of resumption of actual volume of travel. So we need to think what this new normal will mean in the travel space. We can see it emerging in the aviation industry as new regulations start to be discussed. We're probably going to see a compulsory check-in with a health clearance required. Through those bilateral agreements, people have talked about immunity passports. With the cases of reinfection we're now seeing in Korea, that is casting some doubt on whether that will be possible, whether immunity will actually exist. But there may well be some point of health screening. The disinfection of passengers at airports is something that's already being prepared for. Vapor tunnels to actually physically disinfect passengers on arrival at an airport. Multiple cleaning of baggage at the point of check-in, as it enters the aircraft, as it leaves the aircraft. Reduced seating capacity. They're already talking about reducing the seating in a plane so that there's an empty seat next to any single traveler. Potentially a single supplement to airfares where you have to pay for that empty seat next to you. The end of the 30-minute turnaround. Airlines are suggesting that it will now be impossible for them to turn an aircraft around in 30 minutes, because they'll have to deep clean that aircraft. Those of us that work in the aviation sector know what that means. It means less frequency and higher cost. All of these things point towards increased fares, and decreased frequency is becoming inevitable. When it comes to the hotel space, we're going to see the need for deep cleaning of hotels and hotel rooms and skills to achieve that. Probably the end of buffets and increased table service, disposable menus that can be disposed after someone orders, the keys, hotel room keys being disposable, multiple disposable products in place, reduced use of public facilities like gyms, swimming pools, and public areas. And again, reduction of volume is going to mean an increase in rate. So ultimately, this means that the new normal is probably going to be more expensive than travel has been before. The increased aviation cost, accommodation costs driven by those increased operating costs combined with reduced volume. Now, most projections are suggesting that we're not going to see a return to anything like 2019 until 2023. That's what most of the people doing economic projections are saying. Whether or not those businesses that are structured towards high volume tourism can sustain themselves until 2023 is pretty unlikely, which means we may see a higher spend, low volume tourism establish itself and may remain even beyond 2023 as well. So the reality, and I know this is a tough pill to swallow for many operators in Jordan, is that the volume driven model, which we saw come into play in Jordan very strongly last year, is going to be slow to recover. IATA, the head of IATA said this literally 2 days ago, cheap travel is over. With the changes that we're seeing in the space, the days of cheap travel are gone. And this is very likely to be one of our defining characteristics of this new normal. But I don't want to be all doom and gloom here. We do need to consider the potential positives that are here. Every destination, every business has said for years, things would be better in Jordan, things would be better in my business if only things were different. Well, everything that was there before is gone. As Dr. Rafai would know, every one of us that worked in the tourism space and tourism consultants for the last year have heard one term over and over and over again: over tourism. It was the buzzword that everyone was talking about until January. Destinations were developing over tourism strategies. I think we can safely say that problem has been solved. But do we want it back? Do we want to rebuild tourism exactly as it was 2019, considering the problems that the volumes of tourism, the challenges of yield, the challenges of revenue reaching the communities, the challenges of offshore revenue in the travel booking process? Do we want all of that back? Or do we want to build a new tourism that is a better tourism for its stakeholders, for communities in those countries that benefit from tourism, spreading that revenue further than we did before, and also a better experience for our travelers? One that feels less commoditized, that suits those independent travel needs we saw last year, and this pandemic has accelerated interest in that sort of behavior. How can we improve those experiences? How can we make them higher yield and higher profit to the benefit of our destinations? These are questions we should be asking within our strategy. It's not about recovering back to where we were in 2019. It's about renewing tourism for 2020 and 2021 and beyond, a new reset, rethought tourism that benefits everybody. So on that note, I'll hand back over to Kareem to move to our next speaker. Thank you for your time. That's my contact, so if anyone wants to drop me a line if you don't have that already, and I'll still be here for the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Damien. And I know that you have a lot more to share and a lot more content. And hopefully we'll, over the next few weeks, we'll get some more of that in. I think some of the key words here is that tourism is not going to come back like it was in 2019, probably until 2023. However, there is a major opportunity for us, like you said, to look inward, to look at ourselves, to look at our own organizations, at our country. And it's an opportunity to start from scratch and to rebuild it in a way where we can enjoy the influx of tourists again, while at the same time preserving the heritage, the archaeology, the environment, and everything else along with it, to make it more of an experiential experience for those who come to Jordan and really go back with amazing memories. Thanks again, Damien. Reem, moving on to you. It's clear to us that there's a lot of things we need to do. What do we need to do now? What are the things that we need to look as a business, as a country, at our as organizations, to be able to ensure business continuity? What should we do with our cash flow? And if we don't have, if we have some of it or a bit of it, or whatever, what can we do with our cash flow, and how do we sustain ourselves? Over to you, Reem.
Thank you, Kareem. That was very insightful and sad to an extent, Damon. But so let me just start by sharing my screen. Sorry. So yeah, for those who don't know Endeavor, Endeavor is a global organization, and it's currently in close to 40 emerging markets around the world. And it's an organization that caters to and supports a very niche and special, let's say, segment of entrepreneurs. They're entrepreneurs who are, known to be high impact. They're very innovative. They're visionary, passionate, and they are future mentors and investors for the ecosystem. And the businesses that these entrepreneurs run are definitely innovative, fast-growing. They have very clear business goals. They create jobs and they generate revenues. So what I want to do in this presentation is just give you shed some light on what these entrepreneurs have been doing during this crisis, and what have we as Endeavor been advising them, providing the advice that they need, to manage their cash flow, to manage their teams, and options for pivoting their businesses as well. So the companies that we have in our portfolio, we're not we don't just cater to IT companies. We do have traditional businesses in our portfolio. So we have, manufacturing facilities, we have F&B, restaurants. So we do have the traditional businesses, but they do tend to be innovative and scalable and fast growing. So that's the common denominator between those businesses. 3 weeks ago, we ran a survey and we wanted to check with them what was going on with them. So clearly, a good segment of them were completely shut down, and those were the manufacturers, restaurants, and some of the e-commerce businesses that were delivering products not considered as necessities like food or medical products. So they were completely shut down. As the sizable segment was witnessing a minimum to a serious slowdown in the revenue. And those businesses were in the fintech, entertainment, content development, a variety of sectors. Very few of those companies actually were witnessing a surge in their revenues. And we can expect that in the gaming industry. People are at home, they're bored, so they're on their computers, on their mobiles, playing games. The health tech sector also saw a surge. The ed tech sector with the students, going online and everything moving online. So those companies saw a very unprecedented surge in their revenues. And then many of those businesses, actually more than half, already began transforming their businesses, and they will continue doing that. More businesses will be joining them and introducing a hybrid of the old and the new. Investment in digitization is very high. Today, we see a sizable segment of them investing in technology, and this trend is going to be going forward in the foreseeable future. And of course, new practices that will be introduced by the Endeavor entrepreneurs post this crisis. Remote work was identified as something that most will be incorporating into their practices. They realized that they can be holding many of their meetings. Many of the businesses, they don't need to be in rented offices and incur very high operating expenses. They were as efficient or even more working remotely and adopting flexible working hours and just having KPIs for their teams. Now, the most pressing challenges, and this doesn't come as a surprise to anybody, is going to be around cash issues. So managing the cash that they have and then going through the fundraising process, be it equity financing or debt financing. So this will be the most pressing challenge for this year and maybe for next year as well. Now, by nature, entrepreneurs are definitely hustlers, okay? But our entrepreneurs, because they do run the innovative and fast-growing businesses, they're used to this. They're used to being in, let's say, a crisis mode or living in the what we call the unnatural state. What they do, these entrepreneurs, is they're always looking outside. You know, they're passionate and they're driving the business with this optimism and passion, but at the same time, they're always very careful to have different operational scenarios internally. So they're, they're driving the business with optimism and passion, but they're always calculated on the inside. And the common denominator between all of them is that they're agile, they're always pivoting, nothing is a threat for them. Any threat is an opportunity and nothing ever stops them. So any threat that they see out there, they instantly think, how can I turn this into an opportunity for me? How can I monetize on this opportunity? So what are we doing at Endeavor today to advise them? The first thing around cash management is that we're telling them they need to be stretching their penny until the last mile possible. Any budgets or projections for this year are definitely not going to be met. We all know that. And they need to be preserving their cash as much as possible. It's very important to focus on that for business survival. If you owe people money, you need to negotiate with them, negotiate your rent, payment, ask for longer repayment periods, deductions, subtractions. If you owe people money, you definitely also need to negotiate that and see if you can pay less than what you owe. So this is something you need to do immediately. And then look at your expenses as strategic and non-strategic. Anything that is non-strategic has to be immediately eliminated. So you should not be spending a single dollar or dinar on anything that is non-strategic. And then you go to your strategic expenses and look at the fixed and variable costs. So if they are fixed, there's nothing you can do at the moment, but you try to minimize the variable costs as much as possible. And then going forward, what you want to do, of course, is sustain that. So you don't spend money on anything that's not non-strategic, and try to cut down your fixed strategic costs as much as possible, so that you're able, if you're in a position again where you have to cut down costs, it becomes easier for you to do so. And of course, as you're doing this exercise, you have to, of course, you're completely focused on the now, but you should not forget what the ramifications and implications on the business will be in the longer term. So you don't want to reduce any costs today that will have damaging effects in the long run on your ability to generate revenues. So this is something you need to carefully think about as well. Now, if you're, of course, firing people, laying off people, this is a cost that you need to also factor into your analysis. I'm sure all of you now are talking to your banks. You definitely have to do so. The Central Bank of Jordan is injecting massive liquidity now into the market. You can restructure all your debt at very favorable interest rates. There's a longer grace period, longer repayment periods. So this restructuring and the cheaper funding, it will give you an opportunity to build a whole new cost structure. The bottom line, basically, you need to improve all your margins and improve the efficiency of how you're doing your business. The second thing we're telling them around the team and team management is that today is the time for you to stand out as a leader. People will be looking at you. Your team will be looking at you. So transparency, empathy is a must. You also, I mean, you've hired this team, you've invested in this talent. So letting people go might, could be detrimental to your business. So maybe you want to think creatively about how you can lower your expenses and lower your payroll costs. You can think of stock options instead of salaries. Maybe ask your team, some team members to take a leave without pay. But of course, you can also go for pay cuts. And this is an option that now you can exercise as well. But if you go with that option, it's very important that you start with yourself. This is not a bottoms-up approach or solution. You have to start with yourself. You have to start with the managers. So you show your team that you're starting with yourself, you're slashing your salary, your income, and everybody will be on board with that. And the message that you need to communicate with your team is that we're all in this together. And we have to come together to salvage the business and save the business today so that we keep our jobs in the future. And this message has to be very clearly communicated to your entire team. And as I said earlier, of course, there are costs to laying people off. So you might want to think about that. It's very hard to find talent. So try as much as you can to keep your team together. Think strategically together how you can, keep the team and salvage the business as much as possible. Now, if you decide to let people go, of course, you have to document all of those arrangements just to mitigate any future legal action that may arise. And the most important point is it's very important for you when you stand out as a leader to keep your team motivated. You have to keep them updated and engaged in the decision-making process, right? So once they feel that they're part of that process, they will be very supportive and you will be surprised, they can come up with options and scenarios for the business as well. Now, the third point is that we're talking about is that you cannot remain static and continue to be relevant. The reality is changing by the day. So what you need to do is you have to pivot your business to maximize your revenue because the consumer landscape has changed significantly. And you need to look at your business and segment every part of it and examine how you can align the services or the products with this new reality. So any product or service that is performing poorly, you need to basically let go of. Do an exercise of re-envisioning your business for this new normal because post-crisis, the world, as Damon said also, it's not going to be the same, okay? So you need to look at the products and your services and just go through this exercise of imagining how can you reinvent them to match this new reality. okay? It's very important for your business to be technology enabled. You have to adopt more technology. You have to rely on digital networks and platforms to carry out your day-to-day business. Another important exercise that you need to do is weighing your risks and rewards of this change. So managing a business during normal times is very, challenging as it is. Imagine during such a crisis. So you have to, definitely you need to maintain cash to survive. You have to plan various scenarios to guide your decision-making process. Look at business intelligence, data sources to just help you understand what the new trends are in your sector. What are possible opportunities that you can capture? You don't have to do a complete pivot to capture these opportunities. Do what we call a shift pivot. Focus on areas that historically were small opportunities for you, but today can be much larger opportunities. I think the most important message here is that no, we cannot not take a risk today, because the alternative is going to be no business whatsoever. And today is the time actually to do R&D, to focus on upskilling, explore how can you improve your product or service? How can you use this time to develop your own personal skills, improve your productivity as a team? This will have massive long-term benefits down the road. The pivots we are seeing in our portfolio have not been the typical pivots. Usually what happens is that they change the entire business model to achieve product market fit. But what we're seeing is that they're pivoting basically to generate more income. And I'll give you some examples. One of our companies is called Eon. They manufacture clear aligners for the teeth. So you can imagine, they sell them online. So you can imagine, nobody's going to go to a dentist now if they don't have to, or buy such, let's say, a luxury product. So what did Eon do? They're not going to stay out of business. They use the same machinery that they have to make spare parts for inhalers that they are using now. Mawdou', you all know Mawdou'. It's a content development company. It's the Arabic Wikipedia. So Mawdou' now is delivering the online classes for the entire country. That was a massive shift. We have a company called Flora Now. Flora Now is the largest online trading flower platform. Who's going to be buying flowers now? There are no events happening. So what the entrepreneur did was shift into other perishables. He already has that value chain in place. So now he's focusing on fruits, vegetables, exotic fruits and vegetables, and other perishables. So those are just some of the examples that we are seeing. So the bottom line basically is that you can't remain static, okay, and continue to be relevant in the market. This is not going to happen going forward. You, your business, your team, you have to continuously evolve, continuously learn, continuously adapt to changes in the market. You have to focus on the customer and the preferences of those customers, and stay connected with them now, even if you're not selling. You have to keep those lines and connections with your customers. If you have an offline business, you must think of ways to shift online. Use e-commerce platforms where you can place your products and services. You can even open up online stores. And delivery services is, of course, an option that you need to be using. So you must have presence online. This is critical going forward. Now, if you're already online, you need to look for ways to maximize that reach into communities, networks, marketplaces. It's very important that you work on your digital marketing and outreach. So that's basically it for me. And
thank you very much, Reem. This was amazing insight into what is it that organizations need to do to survive, but also to thrive. There are a lot of opportunities. Some of the key ingredients you've already provided, a lot of the key ingredients you've provided, and that is around agility, adaptability, leadership, being creative, looking inward, and what is it that we can do to reinvent ourselves and provide services to our customers. I think in our sector, a lot of the tour operators now are talking about offering tours and packages for domestic tourism. Now, of course, there are also challenges there, because we also know that the Ministry of Tourism is going to be offering a domestic tourism that's subsidized. But there is also an opportunity for us, everybody here listening in, to work together in providing creative, innovative domestic tours. But also, I think Layth has a lot of insight to offer into other ways, and in terms of innovation, including technology, including virtual tours, as well as what can we do today and in the near future to continue thriving as businesses, but also to continue putting Jordan on the map of tourism. Layth, I'll pass it on to you. Everybody, I'm receiving questions. Thank you very much. As soon as Layth is finished with his part, Dr. Talib would like to say a few words, and then we'll start answering your questions. Over to you.
طيب. Thank you very much. شكرا كثير كريم. Hello everybody. Hi Lana, كيفك؟ طيب. Good to see you. مرحبا نضال, كيفك؟ Before I start, I just want to talk a little bit. I'm currently CEO of something called the Innovative Startups Small and Medium Enterprise Support Fund, ISSF. And it's a $98 million fund. Recently, since we've been in lockdown, we've been talking with the World Bank, and today we should hopefully final approval that we've put some money aside for we have 50 to 100 as a convertible note, not necessarily equity investment to try to get money into companies quickly. And we have additional money for companies that are doing things that are specific to COVID-19. The reason that we did that is because we recognize that nothing in the last 50 years is going to appear in the next 50 years. Everything has changed. So I think if people are interested to talk to the fund, we will be looking for people who have new business models. So we will be looking for people that have new business ideas. It is going to be very difficult to know what will work, but it will be very easy to know what won't work. And what won't work is if you come and talk to us with what you've been doing over the last 30 years or 10 years or 5 years, most likely we won't assist to maintain the status quo. We want to try to help you change. So I think if anybody's interested in this, it's very important for you to have a snapshot of what you think the future will look like, and then come to us with an idea on how your business model will change. Now, before this meeting started, I was talking to Karim and to the rest of my colleagues, and I'm going to break up my discussion into two types of things, traditional tourism, something that is close to what we were doing in the past, and non-traditional. So in traditional, one of the things that I was telling Omar is that I think when it does pick up, we're going to be dealing with smaller groups than before. So instead of having mass tourism, you're going to probably be dealing with maybe groups of 5 or 10 or 20. And these groups are going to have to be very controlled. And I was very happy with what Damien said, is there is a concept called HACCP in food processing, where you have to control all of the points. So from the airport to the plane, from the plane to the airport, from the airport to the hotel, from the hotel to the bus, from the bus to the location. So I think one of the things that maybe tourism should look at is how can you control all of the critical points for tourism. And I think as Jordan, we have a very, I think we have a stellar reputation in how we managed COVID. And so I think that will help us leverage it and make use of it to try to do these smaller groups. I think tourism in the medium term is going to look the way tourism was in the 60s and 70s, not mass tourism. Again, something that Damien mentioned. So maybe what we will be promoting in Jordan is the way in which we deal with tourism more than anything else, because that is what will make us look like a safe and trusted place for people to come. So instead of it being anti-terrorism, it's going to be anti-corona. So that's the traditional thing that I think is potentially going to happen. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about is non-traditional tourism. And I was speaking earlier before we started that I had done a lot of work with Siyaha. And in the work that I did, there was a lot of talk about creating experiences for people. And that when people came to Jordan, they enjoyed the experience of the people and the interaction and whatever. And so the question is, how can these experiences be created online for people? And so what this is going to require is a repurposing of what tourism companies do into two things, really. The first one is, if you look at what tourism companies are good at, they're good at developing relationships, they're good at communication, they're good at marketing, they're good at product development, okay? And they're good at logistics, and the product development is related to creating experiences. So at this point, I see that the tourism companies are going to have to think about how they can interact with and intersect with different sectors. And so when you want to talk about creating experiences, the online experience, if you want to look at history, you can create virtual reality and augmented reality using technology. I worked with, in the past, I worked with Hala Zawati, who's now Minister of Energy, on developing something called Easy Info, which was an audio guide for different tourism places in Jordan. That type, and it is well written and it is dramatically narrated. So you have a foundation there that you might be able to put this with pictures, you might be able to put this with virtual reality. So there is work there. I was also thinking that there is an opportunity to bring art, Jordanian art, into tourism, where you can talk to local artists and you can create international online exhibitions, and you get people interested in Jordan through the creativity that our artists can do. And there was something that was mentioned earlier by Damien, which I thought was very interesting. The whole YouTube experience that we have now is where you have user-developed content. So if you can get user-developed content and actually put it in a tourism framework, it keeps Jordan on the mind of people, and you create an experience for somebody to go to Hashem or to have knafe or do whatever through small snippets there. The other thing, and I know this is true from the Jordan Trail, and if you look at the types of tourism that you had outside of Jordan, if you go to France or you go to Italy, you get to visit wineries and cheese making and whatever. You might be able to create online things where people can make, shai b'na'na, can make shai b'melisa, can make khubz al-shrak, can do all of these things, such that it creates a participatory experience for the people who are visiting the website or visiting these types of information, these types of experiences that you're creating for them. And we already have it. It exists. We just have to document it on video and to show it. And there were a couple of other things that I thought were very interesting. When I was younger and I used to go to Jarash, these places, a lot of the tourism guides would tell me, مثلا, the amphitheater in Jarash, tell me go to the top and I'm going to speak in a normal voice and tell me if you hear me. So all of these have acoustic profiles that are very interesting. It might be interesting to create these acoustic profiles and give people the opportunity to actually perform in the Jarash amphitheater to see what they sound like. I think this would be something that has not been done before. And further, if you look at things along the music line, there are tools on internet where you can get somebody بيلعب على العود أو على الكمان or whatever, and can put a line of music and then send it out into the international sphere to see if anybody comes and will add a second line and a third line. And so you have these collective musical experiences. And the ministry could play a very important role in actually promoting this type of tourism through art, tourism through music. I think this would be, I think these would all be very interesting things. And we have in Jordan all of the technical components to be able to do this. What it would need would be a tourism company to be able to see how they can put this together and how to market it using online methods. And it will keep Jordan in mind for potential tourists in the future to come back traditionally, or to find a way to actually monetize this as well. And these were the ideas that I had. There is funding available at ISSF. If anybody has some ideas of how they want to change their business model, with that, I'm finished.
Thank you very much, Laith. And I think what you added really complements and provides us with almost a complete picture now, with starting off with what is the new normal for tourism, which Damien shared with us. What is reality? What is coming in the future? And then Reem was able to share with us the fact that we need to be agile and adaptive and reinvent ourselves, stretch our penny in terms of cash flow, and exhibit a very high level of leadership. And then you ended with saying around there's going to be new guidelines and policies. And this HACCP example that you gave was actually spot on. And thank you for sharing that. And definitely there's going to be a lot of that coming in the near future. There's going to be a lot of trial and error as well, what works and what doesn't work. And it's going to be applied across the board everywhere. And not just in hotels and at airports, but also with tour operators, transport companies, restaurants, on venues, archaeological sites. There will be a lot of that kind of HACCP needed in terms of not just guidelines, but also policies, similar to the policies that were put in place during 9/11 when it came down to security. And then...
No, I was just going to say that we have, there is an ability for Jordan to shine when we are able to develop something that, using this type of thing, we've done it in many places. We just need to rethink it and then promote it. The moment we become viewed as a safe destination means that we will probably be at the top of the list for people to send tourists to us.
Sure, and I'm going to use again a term you said, Laith, earlier, which is safe and trusted. And you're absolutely spot on again. I mean, Jordan has proven itself to be a model in terms of fighting this pandemic. And we should continue with that reputation, with that sound reputation. We reached the peak in 2019 with tourism because we had a sound reputation of being a safe country to visit. And both our king and queen have also been able to show the world that we are a young, dynamic country that is with wonderful and hospitable people. And now we add to that mix that we are safe and trusted with our medical expertise, with our standards, with our high quality. And then finally, with the virtual reality and augmented reality, is basically what you're saying here is we need to stay connected with everybody until they're able to come and visit us. And these are absolutely necessary tools that the government as well as the industry needs to be using to be able, just like Damien showed us in examples with in Africa, what they're doing to stay connected with everybody.
If you allow, my pleasure. If you just allow me one last point, the issue of gamification. In the mid-90s, we did a game for the Ministry of Tourism where you had to answer riddles and puzzles and whatever. This might be something that can be done for all of the sites where players get something, and therefore that's how you monetize.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Laith, very much. Before we move into the question and answer session, I'm going to ask Dr. Talib, who has, Dr. Talib, I'm sure everybody knows, I don't really need to do an introduction. He was ex-minister of several ministries in Jordan, including planning and tourism, as well as others. Also the head of UNWTO for many, many years. And has a lot of insight that he likes to share all the time with everybody. Dr. Talib, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure and honor.
Welcome.
Please take it from here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here with you. I enjoyed listening to each and every one of you. Damon, you did a great job in giving the big picture. Reem, you were so good in stimulating us. And it's excellent to see how businesses should go from now on. But Laith, I think you did a great job opening out our minds to think outside of the box. That's what we need. I'm going to speak about four points very quickly, if you don't mind, Karim. One is there are two phases. I disagree a little bit with Damon in his classification. There is a phase of containment, a phase of recovery. Containment is what we did in Jordan very successfully. Containment is trying to control the medical impact. We did everything we can. We earned the respect of the people of the world. But then recovery is a different story. We move from containment to recovery through rethinking. I agree, Damien. But I prefer to use these two words, containment and recovery. If you don't mind. Now, Jordan has done a great job, that's my second point, in containment. But I'm not sure about how we're moving into the recovery part. I think there's a lot to be learned from this one because it's a much more difficult path to bridge to pass. I believe that Jordan has earned lots of respect. The government has never reconnected with the people like it did during the containment time. Everybody was so respectful. Everybody, we have great people here. But now people are beginning to become a little bit restless and a little bit patiently. And they are beginning to be critical about governments because the government has to move very carefully from this point on. It's all in the hands of governments now. Government can either build on what it has gained before or lose all what it has gained before. I hope they do the first one, not the second one, because I believe that Jordan is now operating behind closed doors government. They're not opening up to people and asking for advice or engaging people. It's not advice. They may know better. It's not, you're not going to get new ideas probably, but the feeling of getting people involved is very important. The reception, we feel that it's coming from top to bottom, not from bottom up. I'm sorry to say this, but it's a very real danger. It's not just us, it's many, many countries around the world that are facing this. Third point I want to say is the plan for Jordan particularly. I think it depends on four major elements. One is domestic tourism, definitely. Domestic tourism is the only way out now. Now, domestic tourism is not something I want to also build on. What Damien said, we have to create an opportunity out of the crisis. Domestic tourism should have been our priority from the beginning. No country could be enjoyed by visitors if it's not enjoyed by its own people. It's a matter of principle to me. I think the people of Jordan must learn how to travel inside Jordan first. We've bypassed that in the past. We were so tempted by people coming to see us. We forgot about our own people. So now it's time to turn back to reality. It's time to emphasize domestic tourism. And domestic tourism means that we need to readjust all our training, our marketing, all our strategies to be redirected. After domestic tourism, we have to look at regional ones. I see no problem at all in having Syria and Lebanon join us by car. You know, flying is going to be a problem for the near future. Everybody knows this. So we need to see how we can attract people from our surroundings first. Egypt, you could bring people by ships through the Aqaba Camp and so on and so forth. But first we have to concentrate on domestic tourism. Second thing is the digital part that Laith alluded to. Today, we have learned that everything can be done digital. Even the ceremonies. I've seen two people getting married over internet, believe it or not. Concerts, I think what Laith said is very, very important to think imaginative outside of the box. Otherwise, we'll be locked in. Now, in that regard, Laith, I would advise everybody to look at the program called Greece from Home. Greece from Home was a very useful program that was done in partnership with Google. Google and Greece put their hands together. It's exactly what you said. Like, it is stimulating people until the time comes for them to come back. Please look at it when we finish this. Go to the internet and see Greece from Home. It's a fantastic program. 14 or 15 different videos that were produced. Fantastic. You fall in love with Greece without even visiting it. That's what we need to do now. The third thing is training and rehabilitation. Everybody needs to be retrained because it's a new world now. We need to do training from abroad. For example, restaurants. We're going to have to change our waiters into packers of delivery. The hotels, we need to clean them better. Airlines, hotels, everybody's going to compete with each other on how clean they are, how sanitized they are. All this needs retraining of people. We need to embark immediately on a training program. The last point, the most important point is there is no future for tourism if the economy itself is not growing altogether. So we need to inject ourselves into the overall economy. And to do that, we need to spend money, even if we borrow money. So, okay. I suggested in one of the papers that I wrote, 10% of GDP of every country must be allocated now from reserves or from borrowing or from anywhere to spend on this endeavor. Now, 1/3 of that will have to be spent on direct spending on the class itself. 2/3 of that should be put into projects that combine tourism with construction, for example. Al-Ata'at, Al-Inshaat. This is a very, very important sector. Both two sectors are very horizontal sectors. These two sectors can feed the economy in so many ways. You know, you remember in the late 20s of the last century, Roosevelt embarked on constructing all the highways in the United States in a time of depression, because that's the way to keep people working. You can't, in times of difficult times, you can't make it tighter. You have to spend money, you have to keep money in the hands of people. So we need to embark on a list of projects, which is very important. We have to do at least $1 billion US in projects, at least in Jordan here. That means we have to do about 10 projects, 10 million each, which is important to do as an average or more, give or take. It's just, I'm just putting some ideas on the table to discuss, because that's the only way we can get people back to work. Now, the last point is, how do we go into the new reality of tourism? I think we need to start thinking, again, I forgot who was the one that said it. I think it was you, Laith or Rima, sure. You said that we have to take care of people from the minute they leave their home to the minute go back to their home. It's very, very important. I think we could embark on a concept called corona-free zone. For example, the Dead Sea area altogether could become a corona-free zone. But this means that we have to think of all the protocols that are connected to that. The minute they arrive to the airport, when they leave their country, how are they checked? How are they tested? How are they going through? Then how are they go to the bus? It's a clean bus. They go into the hotel. How do they gather in the lobby? All of these very strict protocols have to be made. But we need to start thinking of, there's nothing 100% guaranteed, of course, but we can call corona-free zones or safe zones, whatever you want to call them. This is important, very important. Now, the last thing I want to mention is companies like Airbnb, who I happen to be a board member of Airbnb. We're working on producing protocols for cleaning and sanitizing. Very, very important to disseminate this and make it a norm. I'll stop at this point. I have much more to say, but I think I'd like to have it more interactive. Thank you so much, Karim. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Talib, for sharing those insights. And yes, I totally agree with you. Just like other governments around the world are pumping in money in terms of stimulus, the same needs to be done in Jordan. And perhaps, yes, we have to borrow, but all of that, provided that it's borrowed and put into the right places at the right time.
Managed the right way.
Exactly. Then for sure, it will pay off tenfold. And like you said, today there's a wonderful opportunity for the government to build on the Sha'biyya that it has developed. Today, the government is very much liked in a very short period of time and trusted by the people. And if they continue building on that, then for sure the economy will be able to recover, and tourism would go back to be one of the, if not the major contributor to our GDP. Thank you very much, Dr. Talib. I do have a few questions that I have received. There are some comments that are also coming through. The comments are for everyone, you can read. And then if you want to raise your hand to say something, if it doesn't have to be a question, then please, through the Zoom function, you can raise your hand to say something. If it doesn't work, then just send us a message and we'll cue it back to you. Damien, I have a question for you. And I'm reading it as it's come in. I'm not going to be editing anything. Is there any major outbreak country where you can see if people look for holidays? Can you compare it with a Christmas holiday? I'm not sure if that's clear for you as a question.
Not particularly.
Okay. I guess I'll ask the person who asked it to maybe clarify it more. And I have another question until we reach that, until we have that clarified. In your opinion, Damien, are people going to be going through local tour operators when booking, do you think, in the future, or will they still be talking to OTAs? Damien?
It's frozen.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Karim, I have a question for Damien also, if you allow me. I can ask.
I think he's going to have to hear it. If he's offline, let me try and send him a message and see what we can do. Okay. Okay. Damien, you're back, but you're muted.
Sorry, no problem. No, there was an internet outage here. I had to switch networks. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Sorry,
Yes.
the question, sorry, could we just clarify? I didn't, were they
Yeah,
asking, have we seen any destination where people are starting to travel again? Is that what they mean?
I don't know. I'll wait for the response for clarifying that question. But we have another one that we moved on to, which is, in your opinion, do you think that people would prefer in the new era of tourism to book directly, or will they still want to book through an OTA?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's something we're still seeing emerge, and I think it comes back to the issue of trust. One of the biggest challenges we're seeing in this period before we start to move into the recovery period is obviously people's current travel bookings. There's been a huge amount of cancellation, obviously, and different travel suppliers have behaved in different ways to that, between complete refund, immediate refund, to forced or encouraged rebooking for next year, and then 100% cancellation fees as well. As I said, people will be remembered based on how they've handled clients at this time. I was seeing a tour operator in the UK recently that's still insisting on that people come and take their hiking trips, for example, even though people can't access the country because they're saying there's been no government directive against people not hiking. Those sorts of things will kind of haunt suppliers. So there's a lot of erosion of trust out there among some travelers that needs to be carefully managed. At the moment, I think there is a higher degree of trust in some of those booking channels. People see that an OTA is more likely to support them when it comes to reimbursement or rebooking than a direct supplier. But I think if you can show with direct clients that you are supporting them, that you are particularly rebooking or changing dates, and if you have to, you are refunding, that's going to help retain that trust. We'll see what happens. One of the problems with the OTA model, of course, is we need to see what happens with that as well. Those volume-driven businesses, again, which they are going to be challenged as well. Some of them were already experiencing problems before this came. We need to see what's happening. Those of you that saw the news that TripAdvisor made 50% of their staff redundant yesterday, we're starting to see other job losses and changes to some of the OTAs as well. We need to also monitor how they survive through this process as well. But the most critical word, I think, is as in every business relationship, is trust.
Trust. May I add something? Kareem?
Sure.
Just to add to what Damon said, we should also connect with insurance companies. Companies like Lloyd, for example, are doing insurance now for cancellations. I think tour operators must changes because nothing is certain now. I think we need to include the insurance companies in this package altogether. Thank you.
Thank you. Damien, there's another question. We're going back to the first one. The question is, yes, which countries do you think are the ones that might be coming back to travel? Countries, who have been home the longest, will they be the first to travel again?
I think it's hard to sort of lump everybody in a single country into that sort of decision-making process. I think we need to understand that people have been through a little bit of a trauma. One of the concerns we do here is that people that are concerned about travel because they're concerned about second waves of the virus, they're concerned about being quarantined into destinations as well. I think one thing Jordan did a fantastic job of is the way you treated your quarantine people, and the videos, and actually shared that experience as a promotion. And I had multiple people say to me, if I had to be quarantined anywhere, please let it be Jordan, because the experience in other countries have been very different. And that can also negatively impact your image for potential travel as well. And if there is a second outbreak, how would you be handled? So people are concerned. There are fears out there, and that's going to drive a lot of people to domestic travel decisions. But we also need to consider countries where there are lots of viable options for domestic tourism. In America, where I think 60 or 70% of their tourism is domestic, that's going to be a logical choice for Americans. And certainly I saw some data produced by TripAdvisor looking at their client base. And the number one thing they're searching for now in America is domestic travel. So I think Americans will be domestic first. I think a lot of Europeans will be domestic first. France, I believe their tourism is almost 70% domestic. We're going to see people exploring their own countries where they feel safe, where they can drive to, where they know if there's a problem, they can get home again. They also may have less disposable income as well. So I think the same way we're pushing domestic first, in Jordan is going to be the same as every destination. We need to see this is going to be the year of domestic travel some destinations may want to capitalize on that. You know, I think Australia has been really well placed for that, because even before Corona, even though it's hard to imagine, but we may have all forgotten the bushfires, which were the big news story a couple of weeks before this struck. Australia had already seen a drop-off in interest in tourism due to the bushfires, and they'd started a campaign called Holiday Here, Holiday at Home, focusing on domestic tourism. That's going to bear them well now. And also they're looking at New Zealand as a short haul. So we need to understand people's expectations. They're looking for domestic options. They're looking for short haul options. Yes, we're starting to see some movement in China, but how far afield are they likely to go? I think Jordan's, as Dr. Rafai said, concentrate on your domestics, concentrate on your region. The Gulf has always been an important market. As he said, look at those road routes from Syria, from Iraq, from Saudi, where people can access the country and how that can be managed before we even start trying to read which international traveler is going to come first.
Thanks, Damien. I have 4 hands raised. I'm going to take them in order. Lana, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I just want to ask something, of course, and it's my, like, something that something triggers me always when I hear it. It's about cleanliness and sanitation. And I think that this is an issue that we are having at the moment. Of course, the government is doing their utmost, but I think there's a lot of misunderstanding with the people, and especially like when we open, and if we want to care about moving people, taking people all around, the idea of cleanliness and sanitation is going to be very important. So how are we going to implement that with the government to keep all the locations, the roads and everything clean, in order for us to be able to get people to understand we're corona free, but of course cleanliness and sanitation is something very important. Thank you.
Well said, Lana. Thank you very much. And yeah, I mean, like Amjad is saying here in the comment box, these are a lot of great ideas that are coming up in the forum, and they and they're very concrete steps. And I think there needs to be a very strong public-private partnership that has to start very soon or right away, where we can start cooperating together with the government and the private sector to move forward in putting in place all of these policies, guidelines, virtual reality, staying connected, connect Greece from home, and all of these.
I understand, Kareem, but there's something that we need. Of course, now we have a lot of problems more than cleanliness regarding tourism with the government. But I think now that this is the right time, that we need all of us to come together as one hand and to talk about this, because we cannot keep on avoiding the waste and the understanding of cleanliness in Jordan, because for some people, they might look at waste and they consider this as a natural look, something beautiful like they're looking at, whereas other people will look at it as like sickness or something, or you're getting something behind it. So we need to do something together, get hands, join forces together with the government, but we need to tackle this issue because it is becoming more and more bigger. Now with whatever the government is doing, wherever you go walking around, you find the masks, the gloves, everything is dropped in the street as if like this is something normal. So this is what we're talking about. And when we want to get tourists, this is a very important thing when we're talking about hygiene and sanitation. Thank you.
May I respond to that, Kareem, very quickly?
Please do.
Okay, Kareem. And look, one of the good things to do is certification. I think certification is very important. We have to have clear protocols with regard to moving from one place to another. What are the cleanliness standards? There must be certification. Every hotel must display a banner of certification. I'm corona-free certified, or I'm abiding by this protocol. And this certification has to be done by specialized companies. It don't have to be government. It has to be private sector. I believe that's the best way of dealing with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Talib. I have Mona Haddad who has raised her hand.
Hi, thank you very much. Hi, thank you to all the speakers, and it's great to see a lot of friends and colleagues here. I wanted to ask, I think for Laith and Damien, perhaps even Reem, everybody's talking about pivoting, going digital, and we're seeing a lot of changes in consumer behavior, speeding up a lot of technologies that were not moving as quickly, perhaps. But virtual reality has been there for a very long time. So maybe if you can comment a little bit on the statistics on that, how it has been adopted in the travel sector. Brian Chesky had an interview recently with Skift talking about their live, what they launched with their live experiences, that they're trying to use that to generate money, going as far as making the claim that one of the owners of the experience made $5,000 a day. So we're seeing all of these adaptations to experiences going digital, but in all our discussion and questions, the fundamentals of our business is moving human bodies from one place to the other. These are the fundamentals of travel. Is that going to go away? How much percentage of our market's going to go digital? Are we going to be looking at a future of travel that includes a lot of people traveling in their living rooms rather than really going out and exploring places? So if you have any insights on that, thanks.
Sure. Hi, Mona, good to see you. I think we're on a podcast later today together. Yeah, that's a really good point. People talk about virtual experiences, they talk about this, but can it be monetized? And does it actually mean creating a market that has that experience and never actually visits Jordan, which, as you say, would be a major paradigm shift. I'm not a big believer in that. I don't think virtual reality can replace actual reality. I think it has a role in the promotion of tourism, but as a monetized product, I'm not sure what that product was. It was making $5,000 a day. I'd be very interested to hear that. But I have not seen a lot of data supporting that it can actually be monetized that effectively. It can from monetizers in driving people to a CTA or a call to action where they actually book travel or buy a product that they've seen perhaps in that process, sort of agricultural product or handicraft or something. There has to be something tangible there. I think if you look at the model of content at present, the Netflix model, you know, of content being taken, aggregated into single channels and then sold per view back to a channel, the same model that YouTube uses. Yes, I think some of that content can make some money, but it's a very competitive space and it needs to be very compelling. It needs to be very interactive to work. But in terms of it replacing tourism, I'm not a big believer in the virtual replacing the actual. Nothing compares to the real experience, and I think it can give us a virtual sense of it, but it always has to be about the call to action to actually come and travel. I don't see tourism businesses making any kind of credible source of income purely from a virtual experience. I think it would in a way remove them from the tourism space and replace them in the entertainment space, which is a very competitive one to try and sell travel content in. If anyone wants to add to that, feel free.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Damien. I think we're running out of time, so I need to jump into the next one. There's Aysar has also raised her hand
She's not happy.
Sure, I'm here. Awal Ishi, thank you very much for this amazing get together. My question is to Damien, and it's regarding Jordan's response to coronavirus medically has been, to say the least, exceptional. So, and we've always been a hub for medical tourism, at least around the Middle East. Do you feel that medical tourism will become something more booming than it used to be, less? Do you feel like Jordan will be able to exploit its journey in coronavirus to get medical tourism? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I do think Jordan, along with New Zealand and Taiwan, have been global leaders, possibly Australia, when it comes to your control and containment of the virus. And you actually do find yourself in what I see as a uniquely challenging experience that yourself, New Zealand and Taiwan find themselves in, is once you've effectively eradicated the virus from your country, what next? How do you open the borders? Because the obvious risk is as soon as you do that, you reintroduce it to the country. So it kind of puts us in this controlled situation where we have to make these quite tough decisions and tough calls. But I do think the way that you've handled it has created tremendous awareness of that. I think the interview that His Majesty did on that exact topic, it was tremendous PR for Jordan, and not just public relations. Actually, that makes it sound a bit frivolous, but an actual really strong message to the world about how Jordan focused on this problem and dealt with it. And as I said, even the way that you handled quarantine, I have used that with multiple destinations to show how this should be done, to make it a positive experience. And yeah, I think as we look at all of the tourism that's now possible, medical is one of those. And I know it's been a much discussed issue in Jordan. And I do think it's important that we separate wellness from medical as well. I do think there'll be a new focus on wellness. People will be more aware of their health than ever before. They will be looking for travel where they can incorporate staying healthy into that, the food they eat, the exercise they have, and Jordan obviously has great potential for that as well. And then, yeah, your medical facilities are for pure medical tourism. You've always been a leader in that respect, and you've now proven what you're capable of doing at a medical level. This, in a way, has been an incredible marketing campaign for medical tourism and many things. I think we really need to look at that visitor mindset, people that are looking for health, people that are looking for safety, and people that are looking for space. Don't forget that as well. And that falls into a lot of Jordan's tourism as well, outside of those senses. As many of you may have known, I hiked the Jordan Trail last year, and you can't find more space than that. There are so many products and experiences in Jordan that will appeal to the new traveler mindset. It's making those people aware that they're there.
Thank you, Damien. Dr. Talib, you wanted to add something?
No, I just wanted to say I completely agree with Damien. I think what Jordan has done is promoted Jordan, not just in the medical realm, in every other realm. It's part of this come visit Jordan from home. I think Jordan must embark on this immediately. But I want to respond quickly to what Mona said before. I don't think that virtual reality or any other kind of medium would compete with or replace the actual visit. 150 years ago, when they invented photography, they thought that the photograph would discourage people from traveling. Then the video came. Then now the virtual reality. I don't think this actually increases the eagerness to go and experience your own self. I don't see a competition there at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Talib. I have a question related to culinary art. And the question is, would you see sustainable culinary tourism in Jordan, i.e. from farm to fork, with socioeconomic, cultural, well-being and healthy food elements as a viable, inclusive tourism product? Laith, you've touched a lot on this previously. Would you like to add any, would you like to respond to this question?
يعني أنا my only comment about يعني most of what I said is how do you create an experience that is worthy, that people want to partake in. So يعني almost anything that you can think of, if it leaves an impression on somebody, whether it is culinary or art, should be something that is looked into and developed.
Yes.
I think
that's all I have.
If you can focus on a new business line and at the same time propel local economic development, that would be also a fantastic way to make money and also benefit the local community. I wanted just to ask a question to Damien, maybe Dr. Talib. Do you encourage the players in the ecosystem to consider consolidation and mergers, given that it's now a cash run issue, and many players will unfortunately end their businesses in the process? So is this something that they should be seriously contemplating this year?
Damien?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think while we try and remain positive, we do need to be realistic about the downsizing of the industry. the need for consolidation, the need for alternative business streams, the need for alternative employment. When I was last in Jordan, which was at the beginning of the year, the discussion was about the lack of tour guides, that we didn't have sufficient tour guides in Jordan to meet the demand that was there. Obviously, that situation has now been flipped, and whether we'll be in a position for re-employment of all of those people remains to be seen. But alternative employment for those people, what can we do in the conservation space, in the heritage space, to find roles for those people to do? So consolidation, not just within the tourism industry, but other areas as well, I think is going to be really important. Taleb, do you have something to add to that?
Yes, I think there are 2 points here. Number one is tourism was and will always be a small and medium-sized dominated industry. So I don't think mergers into bigger things will become a norm. I don't think that will solve the problem. To the contrary, bigger companies are in more trouble now than smaller companies. But I think what we need to do is readjust ourselves. Today, we don't have, the concept of tourism. When you say what is tourism, tourism is everything we do in life, really. Such a horizontal sector. So I'm encouraging the small businesses now to readapt into other different ways of doing things. For example, restaurants now. Owners of restaurants don't have to start attracting people to come to their restaurants. They have to excel in how to package and deliver to homes. I don't think that this would be, going to restaurants would become the norm from now on. Not for the foreseeable future, at least. So Dream, my suggestion is, let's think outside of the box, see how we can re-employ our people, readjust our businesses rather than merging. I don't think merging is going to solve the cash problem at all. Thank you.
I would tend to agree with Taleb, particularly in the short to medium term. You need to test a lot of different ideas and business models to see what's going to work. And if you merge and you create fewer players, you will have a smaller menu of things. So I think it's important to have diversity at this stage.
I agree.
Thank you very much, everyone. We had almost 100 viewers with us. It's great having you. I would like to close this with Mr. Auni Qawar, our chairman of JITOA. He would like to close it with a few words. Mr. Auni, would you, it's all yours.
Kareem, I think Mr. Qawar is already out, but on his behalf, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for our panelists, Damien, Reem, and Laith. Thank you, Kareem, for moderating. And we do have the presentations of the speakers, so if anyone would like a copy of it, please reach out. We will, inshallah, be holding more sessions within this month, so keep an eye out. We will be sending you all the invitations, and it would be great to have you with us. Thank you again, and have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Omar.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kareem. Bye.
Welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.